today with a good friend of ours, Mr. Jerry Miller. Jerry's definitely a legend in racing in Arizona. He's done some drag racing, as most people start. That's a great, people get the first time to track, usually probably in high school with their friends and hang out there for a while. And we're very lucky to have him here. Jerry, we consider you an Arizona drag racing legend with the emphasis on racing. You've done a lot to represent Arizona in racing over the years. You're known for about driving anything with wheels on it and drove the wheels off of it. You've become quite over the years, you're a fabricator, engine builder, more of a fabricator. But you're known for a lot of things, and I've never seen you challenged with something that you couldn't handle. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Everybody's passion starts from somewhere. Where are you originally from?
My dad had severe arthritis. They were from Iowa, and they looked for a nice, warm, sunny place to move the family, and they moved me out here when I was a month old. So I kind of consider myself a native.
Almost a native, but not a purebred.
Not quite, yeah.
Okay. So you grew up in Glendale?
No, actually, we lived off of 63rd Avenue in Van Buren, which was very rural at that point. We were pretty much out in the country in the 50s.
So was anything out there? Was the aluminum plant out there? That was about it, or
that was on down Van Buren.
Yeah.
Actually, Fowler School was a grade school. It was on 67th and Van Buren, and my mother actually worked there as a cafeteria manager.
So you couldn't get away with a whole lot because your mom worked there?
Oh no, I couldn't get away with anything.
Yeah, kind of ruined that. So you basically grow up here. When's the first time you had the passion? You knew you had a passion for cars, or cars attracted you?
Well, my dad was in construction, and he was working for a contractor, and I was probably maybe 7 or 8, and the contractor took my dad and myself out to South Mountain Speedway, which is long gone, obviously. And I saw those cars, and that was it. I was done.
Were they like quarter midgets, or were they
No,
full
at that point they were jalopies.
My dad actually raced out there.
Yeah.
During those times.
Yeah, they were jalopies, and I remember vividly Bill Cheeseburg because of his name, and I remember Art Bish and a lot of those Arizona racers that went on to run Indy. So that, I thought that was just the neatest thing in the world.
You're kind of hooked.
Definitely hooked.
How did you feed the need when you
Well,
brought up?
I'd get wagon wheels and nail them to a board and have a rope and have my sister pull me. We had an acre, and I had a little oval track back there. And whenever I get somebody to pull me in this thing I cobbled together, that was my deal.
So your sister, as long as your sister was willing to do it, you had a race going.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you ever give her the chance to reciprocate, or did you?
Oh no,
always
I was
convince
the
her?
driver.
The typical driver. Yeah.
Typical driver.
Nothing's changed much over the years, Jerry, has it?
No.
Okay.
And then in grade school, I was into model cars, obviously, but I got into model airplanes a lot too. And when I was in 7th grade, we moved to Glendale. And my dad had a little garage area where I could tinker. And I started building just stuff, but they all had wheels.
What was your first fast car that you remember you drove?
That I drove?
Yeah, that you built. I mean, you did something to make it go faster.
I'm probably wanting to say, I personally, I never had personal cars. I did have a 55 Chevy and a 57 Chevy, and I did tune on them a little bit and change things, but I never really had a car, that was something that was like my baby. I was more into, competition cars, that sort of thing.
So you went to Glendale High School.
Went to Glendale High School.
Had some famous people you went to school there with.
Well, the first day in high school, my freshman year, I met this tall guy by the name of Bob Ream. It was all downhill from there.
Ever it's all downhill. You had the bug. Somebody else that had the bug that shared a passion. with
I
you.
found out that Bob was racing go-karts. I had wanted a go-kart or a quarter midget since I saw that deal. I begged my dad to have a quarter midget, especially when we moved to Glendale. There was a quarter midget track right there, and so my last 2 years in grade school, I was bugging him all the time. But you know, we were working class people, or my folks were, and they didn't have a budget for a quarter midget. So I met this guy in high school, this tall guy, and found out he was racing go-karts. I attached myself to him like a tick. Went to the races with him a couple of times, and I found somehow I came across an old go-kart chassis. And at that point, in our freshman year, we had metal shop. Well, I took it to metal shop and got it up and going, put a 4-cycle motor on it. And at that time, we were racing at Luke Air Force Base, and we were racing at Cartland down on Indian School Road. And took it to Cartland and started racing my go-kart there. And that was like the epitome, you know, I'm racing now.
You managed to put a cart together.
This is way cool.
You were doing it.
Yeah.
And this is in high school?
Yeah.
Pretty much do that through high school?
Through high school, yeah.
So there came a time when they said, Mr. Miller, you can move on now. You're out of high school.
Yeah, actually, I got hooked up with a guy. Actually, Bob was working with a guy by the name of Jim McCauley. Jim McCauley on the side was building go-karts, and I started going to work with Jim, or building go-karts after school. And we started racing go-karts, and the thing was going really well, and unfortunately he lost his life in an airplane accident. But after high school, I met this other guy, this other Glendale kid. I was actually in high school, and his name was Trip Shoemake. Well, Bob and I, our typical deal was we'd Saturday night, if we weren't going to Beeline, we'd go to Manzanita, and then we'd go Cruise Central. So I'm back at the circle track for the first time because I've got wheels and we can go out there, and I go, man, I got to do this. I got to do this Manzanita thing. And Trip Shoemake happened to live across the alley from a guy that had a car at Manzanita, and Trip calls me and says, hey, he's got a chassis and a body and a bunch of stuff out in the alley because he's building a new car. I said, okay, I'm coming over. We go over there. Guy's name was Butch Crawford. He's building a new car. He's got this chassis out there and a body and a front axle. And I said, hey, how much you want for that? He said, I'll take $400. So we bought all that. I brought it home. I started working on roll cage, this and that. Met another guy by the name of Ricky Stewart at the slot car track because we were all racing slot cars. Him and I started putting this car together, and then I started working at Chuck's Speed Center. Chuck said, bring the car down. It took 1.5 years, almost 2 years for us to get this car together. But we finally got it together, and I made my debut at Manzanita. In the meantime, working at Chuck's, I was involved with all the drag racers. And to go back a little bit, my first vehicle, my dad said, I got a vehicle for you. I was a junior in high school. I said,
Independence.
okay. Huh?
Your independence. You were free to get your own vehicle, you go places.
Yeah. He said, I got a vehicle for you. He said, we're going to get it, and you're going to pay me back. We went to this place on Maryland, and back in the back was a 54 Ford pickup, and I look in the bed, and the motor's scattered all in the back, and it was a painter's truck, and it had paint dripping all over it because they mixed paint on the fenders, you know, those big flat fenders. So we got that thing home, I sanded, And we didn't get that thing running until probably about my last day of high school. I got to drive it the last day. That weekend, I took it to Beeline.
Your first time out.
My dad, this was all on the QT, took it to Beeline. In my class, there was another 54 Ford pickup, and I remember we were both three on the tree, and we could see each other, and I beat him by a fender, and I got this trophy. Now, I've got a problem, because I can't take this trophy home. So that was my first drag racing. From then on, probably everything that I drove, I took out to race at Beeline just because it was fun. I took my 57 Chevy out there, took my 55 out there. I even had a Honda 305 motorcycle that I drag raced at Beeline, Mel Larson's. So I did a lot of drag racing stuff, and Bill actually did a lot of suspension work on drag cars. But
You had a passion for dirt.
I did. I got my old car up and running. I ran it for a year, and fortunately, a friend that I had made at the Western World Race from Nebraska came down with his car before their season opened, and he had a ride with a local car owner, but he brought his car just as backup. He said, you know, I got this car here, why don't you just hop in and run it? Well, the stuff that he had was really good stuff. I mean, really good stuff. And I was kind of a back marker at that point. Well, I jumped in that thing the first night, and I qualified the second quick, won the trophy dash, and I think we ran sixth in the feature. I think I'd only ran about 3 features before that.
You landed on the map.
I did. And when he went back to Nebraska, the guy that he was driving for hired me to drive his car. And at that point, I mostly drove for everybody.
So you mainly, all the sprint cars you drove, or you were the hired gun,
I was a hired gun.
and you basically, I know that you raced all over the country.
I did. Being single and young, my buddy from Nebraska kept bugging me, and he said, you know, you run maybe 25, 30 times a year. He said, come back to Nebraska, we'll run 50 or 60. I got a ride here, I'm doing good. Well, finally, the third year that I ran, he talked me into coming back to Nebraska, and I got a ride back there, and ran a season back there. And I was on and off into the Midwest racing.
So you a lot of sprint car racing.
A lot of sprint car racing.
I know that at some time in your life you learned how to fly.
I did.
So where was this in your timeline of flying airplanes?
Well, I did the World Outlaws, partial World of Outlaws tour in '80, and I came back into town, as usual, no job, no money, but I had a good day, a good year of racing. And a good friend of mine, we had an opportunity to start a little business in Prescott, Arizona. And so I had always, racing and flying were actually my 2 passions. I wanted to be an Air Force pilot, but my eyeballs said no. So when I was in Prescott, I had time, we had the opportunity, and I learned to fly. I bought a little Cessna, and I learned to fly in Prescott, and that was 83, I think, 82, 83.
So that was your other adrenaline rush.
Absolutely.
So along the way, I know that you did a lot of different types of racing. So
I did.
Tell us about the armor car.
Well, I was racing a midget at Manzanita, and unfortunately...
What year was this about?
79, no, I'm sorry, 84.
Okay.
I was racing a midget at Manzanita, and a guy spun out. I pancaked into him, sitting there, everything's good, and a guy that had his head somewhere else drove into the back of the car. It ruptured the fuel cell. I caught fire. Fortunately, I bailed out of the car. I'm on flames. They put me out. No harm, no foul. Had a good suit, had good safety equipment. I'm walking across the infield, and a friend who had been working on another car said, "We got to get you out of this kind of racing." And I'm like, "Why?" You know, this is just normal. So I found out later that he was a national sales manager for Armour Foods. And we put together, a friend of mine, Charlie Lang, and I put together a proposal to go Trans Am racing. Prior to that, I had also raced Formula Fords, Formula Atlantics, or not Atlantics, Sports 2000s, and Formula V's. So I had some road race experience. So we put a deal together, and we did the Trans Am series for 2 years.
And what was that like? Also a whole different.
It was a whole different deal.
So somewhat, even though you grew up in Glendale, which is really not, we're not considered to be really bumpkin country, but we're kind of backwater compared to some of those guys. What was the culture shock like?
We're
for that?
rural, let's put
Yeah,
it that way.
we're rural, yes.
Well, all of a sudden, I'm in the sport from Manzanita, beer drinking Saturday night, dirt track racing, and we're going racing, and I'm wearing slacks and button shirts, and you know, doing interviews and all that stuff. It was a neat deal because I had known about road racing. Obviously, I was a race junkie, and I kept up with all kinds of racing. So I got to race racetracks that I only read about. I got to race through the streets of Long Beach. I got to race through the streets of Detroit.
Watkins Glen.
Watkins Glen, Road America, Road Atlanta, all the places that, you know, it was a great experience.
Our Arizona drag racing legend, who used to race this 305 Honda, it's now
At
become
Beeline.
at Beeline is now on the world stage basically in that type of racing.
Yeah, I raced against in my era, Wally Dallenbach, some blue-eyed guy by the name of Paul Newman.
Made some kind of dressing for some.
Yeah, Willie T. Riggs.
Wow.
You know, that was the guys I raced with on the weekends. It was a great experience.
And that, you know, added something you could do only with a great sponsorship.
Yep. Well, we were a privateer, and we probably had maybe a tenth of the budget
Right.
that the factory teams had. We had, you know, you had 10 factory sponsored teams between Nissan, Ford, Chevy, you know, it was pretty tough sledding, but you know, we managed to be in the area between 10 and 15, which when you have 30 cars, that was pretty good for our budget.
And the car was a good looking car and you showed well on the track.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is you do well for your sponsor.
Right.
That's, you know, results are great, but we did well for the sponsor. We did a lot of things for the people that work for Armour. We displayed the car in various places, and we did a lot of at-track entertainment of people that were Armour associates. And
So you enjoyed that time?
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Then it was time to say, okay, I'm transitioning to something else.
Well, I finally got married.
Somebody rescued you.
Yes, and we had a child, and I told my wife, I said, before she goes to school, I'm gonna have a steady job, and we're gonna have a future, basically. I found a job from a company that had moved from California to Oklahoma, and it was a big composite shop, carbon fiber, fiberglass. We did a lot of stuff for Lockheed. I ended up working there. We did stuff for Lockheed, but we did a lot of stuff for kit-built airplanes. A particular job came through, and it was a two-place tandem, 300-mile-an-hour experimental kit plane, and it had a big block Chevy in it, an all-aluminum At that point, it didn't have anything. We were making molds. I got in touch with the guy that well, he actually, the principal of the guy was at our shop a lot, back and forth. He learned about my background with racing and motors, and he said, we're airplane guys. We don't know anything about motors, car motors. Would you like to come to work? I ended up going to Kansas City. We built the plane. We introduced it at Oshkosh, which is the biggest fly-in the world. We sold a couple of kits, and then I got to fly backseat as a mechanic or as a crew chief in the airplane to various air shows. And that was an awesome experience. And then a friend of mine who I'd known here forever, Gary Grossenbacher, who had graduated from ASU with an engineering degree, was working for Al Holbert in his GTP car, and did a lot there. And he ended up getting the rights to a defunct wind tunnel at the University of Columbus. He started doing some wind tunnel work for General Motors in their NASCAR stuff. Well, they sent him down to North Carolina to disseminate the wind tunnels knowledge that they found to the GM teams. And he got hooked up with some people, and he calls me and he goes, you need to come, we're putting together a NASCAR Busch deal. You need to come down here and run the fab shop. And I said, no, I'm happy with this airplane thing. And he ended up setting an airplane ticket and doing the whole deal, and I ended up going to NASCAR, had a great career with different teams.
You worked with several great teams, like
I did.
you talk about many times the Red Bull team and the different.
Our Busch deal that we put together was a 3-year deal that lasted 9 months. That's how NASCAR is. And I went to work for Felix Sabates at Sabco Racing, and I worked there 3 or 4 years until Chip Ganassi came in and bought the team. And I worked for Chip for 9 years, and then I went to the Red Bull team.
So you're following a different passion. You weren't driving any longer, but your knowledge and your skills were keeping the cars on the track and doing all the.
Actually, when I was back there, I kind of skipped the chapter where I started building IMCA modifieds.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that as well. I firsthand.
And while I was back there, I did build an IMCA modified and was racing on the weekends.
Well, the IMCA modifieds, while you're still in Phoenix, a friend of mine, Tyler Krause, and I said, yeah, let's try it. So there's Jerry Miller, and the way Jerry thinks is like, it's kind of like the great chassis builder, racer, competitor. It's not what the rules said, it's what the rules didn't say. So IMC modifieds at the time, most people were using like a 108-inch wheelbase chassis, like a Chevelle chassis, and we had an El Camino chassis.
Well, they had a motor setback rule from the center of the back axle.
Right.
So if you actually extended the front, you had more percentage of motor setback.
So our IMC modified, the only thing race car I've ever been involved with that wasn't a drag car, got us a lot of attention because we did 2 things. We had a Ford motor in it with an HEI distributor, which screwed everybody up because they couldn't figure out what engine it was because it looked like what's that Chevy distributor in the front of that motor? And we constantly were being measured because our spark plug it was too far back of the
ball joint.
Of the ball joint that people had said you're cheating, and our car was probably fumbled over many times before people realized that no, we weren't. And we had a lot of fun with that car.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went on, you did some of that back when you were in North Carolina?
Yes, I built my friend and I built a car back there, and we raced a little bit. And I think I skipped over the unlimited hydroplane deal.
Oh, you did. I remember that. Yeah.
I got hooked up with a friend of mine that, actually, if you guys remember Bill Boat, Arizona legend.
Another legend, yeah.
Yep. He was involved in the Lincoln Thrift hydroplane. A guy that worked there, George Magnuson, I believe. He had continued when Lincoln Thrift folded. He had continued in the sport. He calls me. I had a shop in Glendale. He calls me up and he said, "Hey, I'm in Detroit. I'm working on this hydroplane. It has 2 Allen Roots 650 50 cubic inch all aluminum Fords with Mooneyham blowers. I said, I thought everybody was turbine. He goes, we're the last of the automotive guys. And he said, we're having trouble with the windage, can you build some oil pans, which I did. They called me and said, we're gonna go to San Diego and race, you wanna go tag along? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I went over there, crewed on the deal. They called me back in that next summer and they said, you wanna go play mechanic on this Unlimited? Which I did, and I ended up actually being the crew chief when we took the boat to Hawaii and raced in Pearl Harbor. So that was a great experience. I just wish that I could have been in it longer, because I saw some things that I thought we could have played with a little bit.
Not bad for an almost native Arizona kid.
Not bad.
So you
I've got no regrets.
you did all this. You drove the wheels off things. You've tuned stuff. You've flown planes. You've fabricated. You've built. You've been very hands on. Your early career Chuck Speed Center. And then moving on from there, this whole cycle came that it's time to move back to Arizona.
Absolutely.
You brought your wife, your daughter,
Yep.
beautiful daughter, back to Arizona to live.
Yep.
And for a guy that's probably retired, you're busier than anybody else I know. You're fabricating cars. You're building headers still. You're taking projects on that most people wouldn't, sane people wouldn't take on, and you're turning out beautiful stuff.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. I did build a shop behind my house, and evidently I can't say no.
Oh, you're here. You didn't say no to us. Thank you. We're happy you're here.
Well, I appreciate that.
You've had a great run, and it's nowhere near over. I mean, your energy is just like unbelievable still, and you should be very proud of that. And I'm very honored to have you as a friend. We're very proud of you in Arizona for all the things you've done. You've probably done more amazing things outside the Arizona than inside Arizona, because your passion took you there, but your Arizona roots were always there.
Absolutely. I'm always going to be a Glendale boy.
Yeah, always a big Glendale boy. You are truly, and we're happy to have you truly in Arizona, racing legends with roots in drag racing.
Absolutely.
And thank you for being here, Jerry.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.